You set the rule at 10 p.m. No more scrolling, no more snacking, no more giving in. And at 10:14 p.m., the rule is already broken. Phone in hand, fridge open. The thing you swore you wouldn't do. Done. Again. And now comes the familiar cycle. Guilt, self-hatred, a new promise, starting tomorrow. And the quiet certainty that you are weak, that everyone else can resist, that something inside you is broken. Nothing inside you is broken. The game is rigged. Every app on your phone was designed by teams of behavioral psychologists whose sole job is to make your brain crave the next tap. Every product on your shelf was engineered to trigger a purchase you didn't plan. Every piece of junk food in your kitchen was formulated in a lab to override your satiety signals. You are not fighting your own weakness. You are fighting a billion-dollar machine that has studied your brain's vulnerabilities and weaponized them against you. And the self-help industry's answer? Use willpower, as if willpower, a finite neurological resource that depletes with every decision you make throughout the day, is a match for a system designed to drain it. The samurai didn't rely on willpower. A warrior who depends on willpower in battle is a warrior who dies the moment his energy dips. The samurai relied on something far more durable: structure, boundaries, and trained responses that functioned whether the warrior felt strong or exhausted. Today, you'll learn 7 Japanese defense mechanisms that make temptation irrelevant, not through fighting it, but through building a fortress it cannot penetrate. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why willpower always fails. Willpower is not a character trait. It is a chemical resource, and it runs out. Every decision you make during the day, what to eat, what to wear, how to respond to an email, whether to bite your tongue, draws from the same limited pool of prefrontal cortex energy. By evening, that pool is nearly empty. This is why your worst decisions happen at night. Not because you're a different person at 10 p.m., because your decision-making fuel has been burned through by the 200 decisions you made between 7 a.m. and now. This is called ego depletion, and it's the reason every "I'll just resist" strategy collapses after sundown. You're trying to fight your strongest temptations with your weakest brain. The man who says, "I won't eat junk food tonight" at 8 a.m. has the prefrontal cortex energy to mean it. The same man at 9 p.m., after a full day of work decisions, social interactions, and stress management, has almost nothing left. The temptation hasn't gotten stronger. His resistance has gotten weaker. And in that gap between diminished resistance and unchanged temptation, every relapse lives. The samurai understood this without naming it. They never relied on in-the-moment strength to make the right choice. They built systems, physical, environmental, psychological, that made the wrong choice difficult or impossible, regardless of how they felt. A warrior who needs to feel strong to make good decisions is a warrior who fails every time fatigue arrives. The 7 mechanisms that follow don't ask you to be strong. They make strength unnecessary. Each one removes a layer of dependence on willpower until temptation becomes something you barely notice. Not because you conquered it, but because you restructured your life so it can't reach you. The first mechanism is the most powerful, and it works before the temptation even appears. Chapter 2. Kekkai, the invisible barrier. In Shinto tradition, a Kekkai is a sacred boundary, an invisible barrier around a shrine that impure forces cannot cross. You can't see it. You can't touch it. But within the Kekkai, the space is protected. Nothing harmful enters. Your life has no Kekkai. Your phone sits on your nightstand. The temptation machine positioned 12 inches from your sleeping brain. Junk food sits in your kitchen. The craving trigger stored inside your own fortress. Social media is one tap away on a device you carry at all times. You've invited every temptation into your most intimate spaces, and then blamed yourself for giving in. This is not a willpower failure. This is an architecture failure. You built a house with the enemy already inside. The Kekkai protocol is environmental defense, restructuring your physical space so that temptation requires effort to access. Not willpower, effort. Physical, measurable effort that buys your rational brain the 10 seconds it needs to intervene. Phone after 9 p.m., it doesn't go on silent mode. It goes in a drawer, in another room. Getting it requires standing up, walking, opening a drawer, and making a conscious decision. Those 30 seconds of physical effort are the Kekkai, the barrier between impulse and action that didn't exist when the phone was on your nightstand. Junk food in the house? It doesn't get pushed to the back of the shelf. It doesn't enter the house. The Kekkai is the front door. If it doesn't cross the threshold, you will never eat it at 10 p.m. Not because you resisted, but because there was nothing to resist. The browser that leads to your worst digital habits? Block the sites. Not with willpower, with software. Extension blockers that require a 30-second delay and a typed confirmation before access. That delay is the Kekkai. Most impulses die in 30 seconds of friction. The principle is absolute. Never fight a temptation that's already in front of you. Fight it at the border. Prevent it from entering your environment. Because once it's inside, once the phone is in your hand, once the junk food is in your kitchen, once the website is open, willpower is the only thing standing between you and the behavior. And willpower, as we established, is almost certainly depleted by the time the temptation arrives. Every relapse you've ever had happened because the temptation was already inside your Kekkai. Seal the borders, and the battles you've been losing every night simply stop occurring. But some temptations can't be blocked environmentally. Some cravings arise from inside, neurological, hormonal, emotional. When those hit, you need a different weapon. One that doesn't fight the craving, but survives it. Chapter 3. Gaman, Riding the Fire. When it arrives, the pull toward the phone, the hunger for the food, the itch for the behavior, it feels like it will never leave unless you give in, as if resistance means suffering forever, as if the only escape is surrender. This is the craving's greatest lie. Every craving is a wave. It rises, peaks, and passes. The entire life cycle of a craving, from first impulse to complete dissolution, is approximately 10 to 15 minutes. If you can exist inside that wave for 10 minutes without acting, the craving passes on its own. Your neurochemistry rebalances, the urgency evaporates, and you're standing on the other side, intact, without having given in to anything. The Japanese call this endurance Gaman, the practice of bearing the unbearable with patience and dignity, not fighting, not distracting, bearing, sitting with the discomfort the way you'd sit with physical pain, acknowledging it, feeling it fully, and waiting for it to pass. When the craving hits, don't reach for a distraction. Don't try to think about something else. Don't argue with the urge. Close your eyes. Feel where the craving lives in your body, the chest, the stomach, the throat. Notice its texture, its intensity, its rhythm. Watch it like a fire, and do absolutely nothing. Minute 1-3. The craving intensifies. Your body screams to act. Every fiber says, just do it. It's not a big deal. You deserve this. Minute 4-7. The peak. Maximum intensity. This is where 95% of people break. The fire is hottest here. Hold. Minute 8-10. Something shifts. The intensity plateaus, then begins to fade. The urgency that felt permanent 5 minutes ago starts to feel optional, like a wave pulling back from shore. Minute 11-15. The craving dissolves. Not because you fought it, because you outlasted it. The neurochemical spike that created the urgency has been metabolized. Your brain has moved on. Every time you successfully sit through a craving wave, two things happen. First, the craving's power diminishes in future occurrences. Your brain learns that the spike doesn't result in reward, so it fires with less intensity next time. Second, your tolerance for discomfort grows. The window between I want it and I need it widens, giving your rational brain more room to operate. The samurai practiced Gaman not as philosophy, but as tactical training. A warrior who cannot endure 10 minutes of discomfort cannot endure 10 seconds of combat. Temptation is your combat, and combat is won by the man who can hold position when everything in his body tells him to break. Two mechanisms deployed, borders sealed, fire endured. But sometimes the craving doesn't arrive as a gentle wave. Sometimes it ambushes you, suddenly, violently, from inside. And Gaman alone isn't enough. When that happens, you need a circuit breaker. Chapter 4. Misogi, the state shock. There are moments when the craving doesn't build slowly. It detonates. You're exhausted, stressed, emotionally raw, and the urge hits with a force that makes rational thought impossible. Your hand is already moving. Your brain has already decided. Gaman requires 10 minutes of endurance, and you don't have 10 seconds. This is when you deploy Misogi, the violent reset. Misogi is the ancient Shinto purification ritual of standing under freezing water. You don't need a waterfall. You need a shock. Splash ice-cold water on your face. 10 splashes. Hard, fast, targeting your forehead, cheeks, and eyes. Here's what happens neurologically. Cold water hitting the face activates the mammalian dive reflex, an involuntary response that drops heart rate, redirects blood flow, and floods the brain with norepinephrine. The dopamine loop that was driving the craving is physically interrupted. The neurochemical state that made the temptation feel irresistible is replaced by a completely different neurochemical state: alert, sharp, calm. The craving doesn't fade gradually, like in Gaman. It breaks, like snapping out of a trance. One moment you're in the grip of an urge you can't fight. The next, wet-faced, breathing hard, suddenly clear. The urge seems distant, foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Misogi is emergency protocol. Not for every craving. Most can be surfed with Gaman. But for the ambush moments, the 10 p.m. collapses, the stress-driven spirals where your prefrontal cortex has gone completely offline. Cold water on the face is the fastest circuit breaker that exists. Keep the weapon loaded. A bowl of cold water in the freezer. Ice available. When the ambush comes, and it will come, you have 5 seconds to reach the reset button before the behavior takes over. Make those 5 seconds count. 3 mechanisms: barriers, endurance, and emergency reset. But there's a deeper skill that the samurai considered more important than all external defenses combined. A skill that makes you immune to temptation rather than resistant to it. Chapter 5. Fudoshin, the observer state. Every temptation has a hidden requirement. It needs you to identify with the urge. The craving can only control you if you believe the craving is you. I want junk food feels like your desire. I need to check my phone feels like your need. The urge and your identity merge, and once they're merged, resisting feels like fighting yourself. Fudoshin, the immovable mind, is the samurai practice of separation, separating you from the urge, observing the craving as something that's happening to your brain, not something that is your brain. When the urge arrives, instead of "I want this," you reframe, "My brain is generating a craving right now. Interesting." Instead of "I need to check my phone," you observe, "A phone checking impulse just fired. I notice it." This sounds like a word game. It's a neurological intervention. When you identify pranturjan with the urge, "I want," you activate first-person emotional processing. The amygdala engages. The urge feels urgent and personal, and your entire reward system mobilizes to pursue the desire. You're in the feeling. When you observe the urge, "My brain is generating a craving," you activate third-person cognitive processing. The prefrontal cortex engages. The urge becomes data instead of demand, and the emotional charge drops measurably. You're watching the feeling, and a feeling you're watching has dramatically less power than a feeling you're experiencing. Research on mindful observation of cravings found that subjects who practiced third-person reframing, "I notice my brain is craving X" instead of "I want X," showed a 40 to 50% reduction in craving intensity and a significant decrease in subsequent acting on the craving. Same craving, same brain, different relationship to it. The samurai practiced Fudoshin by training themselves to observe their own fear in combat without merging with it. My body is producing a fear response. I notice adrenaline. I notice the urge to retreat. The fear was acknowledged. It was not obeyed, because the warrior was not his fear. He was the observer of his fear, and the observer has choice. The fear does not. Your Fudoshin practice, Next time any temptation fires, catch the language. Replace I want with I notice my brain wants. Replace I need with a need signal just fired. Do this out loud if necessary. The verbal reframe activates different brain regions than silent thought. Say it, I notice a craving for my phone. Interesting. Let me watch what happens next. What happens next is almost always the craving weakens because you stopped feeding it with identification. And a craving without identification is just neurological noise. 4 mechanisms: borders sealed, fire endured, circuit broken, identity separated. But defense alone doesn't win wars. The 5th mechanism shifts from defense to offense, and it makes temptation irrelevant by replacing the void it was trying to fill. Chapter 6. Ikigai, the armor of purpose. Here's a truth about temptation that most self-help ignores entirely. Temptation doesn't attack strong men. It attacks bored men. A man with nothing meaningful to pursue fills the void with cheap stimulation. Scrolling, snacking, binging, consuming. All of it is the brain's attempt to generate dopamine in the absence of purpose-driven dopamine. The craving isn't for the food or the phone or the behavior. The craving is for chempli, something, anything, that makes the empty hours feel alive. Ikigai, the Japanese concept of a reason for being, is the offensive weapon that makes temptation irrelevant. Not by blocking it, by replacing it. When your mind is consumed by something you genuinely care about, a project, a skill, a mission, a creative output, the cheap dopamine sources lose their pull. Not because you're resisting them, because you genuinely don't need them. The higher quality dopamine from purposeful work has filled the void that temptation was trying to fill. A sniper locked on a target doesn't notice the mosquitoes. Not because he's ignoring them, because his attention is so consumed by something meaningful that irrelevant stimuli simply don't register. This is why the man with no direction is the man most vulnerable to temptation. Every self-help trick in the world, cold showers, blocking apps, meditation, treats the symptom. Ikigai treats the cause. Fill the void with something that matters, and the junk that used to fill it becomes genuinely uninteresting. Your Ikigai doesn't need to be a grand life mission. It needs to be a daily engagement, something that demands your focus and rewards it with genuine satisfaction. Learning a language, building a skill, creating content, writing, training, studying a subject that fascinates you. Anything that produces real dopamine through real effort instead of fake dopamine through passive consumption. The protocol. Identify one thing you can work on for 30 minutes daily that produces genuine engagement, not entertainment. Engagement. Something that requires effort and gives back meaning. When the evening arrives, the peak temptation window, spend your first 30 free minutes on this instead of defaulting to the screen or the fridge. The Ikigai block fills the void before temptation can. 5 mechanisms deployed, but even the best fortress has blind spots. The 6th mechanism is the radar that detects the ambush before it even begins. Chapter 7. Zanshin, the constant radar. Every relapse has a pattern. Every failure has a setup. And if you're paying attention, you can see the ambush forming before it strikes. Zanshin, lingering awareness, is the samurai practice of remaining alert after the immediate threat has passed. In swordsmanship, Zanshin means staying ready after the strike. In temptation management, Zanshin means knowing your vulnerable moments before they arrive. Your weak points follow a schedule. For most people, the commute home after work, transition stress. The first 30 minutes after arriving home, decompression void. Late evening when fatigue peaks, depleted willpower. Weekend afternoons with no structure, boredom void. These are your ambush points. And they're predictable. Zanshin protocol. At the start of each week, identify your 3 most vulnerable time windows. Then preload each one with a specific defense. The commute home, podcast, or audiobook cued. Your brain has input that isn't the phone's default feed. Late evening when fatigue peaks, Kekkai already active. Phone in the drawer, junk food never entered the house. Weekend afternoons with no structure, a pre-scheduled activity that fills the boredom void before it forms. The ambush only works when you're caught off guard, when you see it coming, when you've mapped the schedule and preloaded the defenses. The temptation arrives and finds the fortress already sealed. It doesn't even feel like resistance. It feels like the temptation simply bounced off. 6 mechanisms keeping you safe. But what happens when the fortress is actually breached? Because eventually, you will fall. The 7th mechanism determines whether that fall destroys you or teaches you. Chapter 8. Shoshin, the Zero Baggage Protocol. You will fall. The fortress will be breached. A craving will overwhelm every defense, and you'll find yourself doing exactly what you swore you wouldn't do. This is not a possibility. It is a certainty. And how you respond to the fall determines everything. The typical response: guilt, shame, I'm worthless, I have no discipline, what's the point of even trying? This response feels like accountability. It's actually self-indulgence. The ego dramatizing a failure so it feels significant. And the guilt itself becomes a trigger for but its stain. More temptation. Because guilt is an emotional low that your brain tries to fix with the fastest dopamine hit available. The very guilt about the relapse causes the next relapse. A perfect trap. Shoshin, beginner's mind, is the Zen practice of approaching every moment as if it's the first. No accumulated baggage. No narrative about past failures. No identity built around being someone who can't resist. Just this moment. Fresh. Uncontaminated by what came before. You fell. Acknowledged. No story. No drama. No guilt spiral. The next second. Not tomorrow. Not Monday. The next second. You return to baseline. Kekkai intact. Gaman ready. Fudoshin engaged. The fall is data, not identity. You slipped at 9 p.m. because your Kekkai had a gap. The phone was still accessible. Fix the gap. Move on. The samurai who lost a duel and survived didn't spend weeks in shame. He analyzed what went wrong, adjusted his technique, and trained the next morning. The loss was information. The response was immediate recalibration. No wasted time on guilt. No wasted energy on self-punishment. Just correction and continuation. Your Shoshin practice. After any relapse, write one sentence in your notebook, not a paragraph of self-analysis. One sentence. I fell because. Fix. Then close the notebook. The fall is filed, the fix is logged, and you are already moving forward. Guilt is a luxury a warrior cannot afford. It consumes energy that should be spent on rebuilding. Drop the guilt. Keep the lesson. Begin again. 7 mechanisms, each one a layer in a fortress that temptation cannot penetrate. Kekkai. Seal the borders. Remove temptation from your environment before it arrives. But never fight what you can prevent. Gaman. Ride the fire. Sit with the craving for 10 minutes. Watch it rise, peak, and pass. Outlast it. Misogi. Break the circuit. When the ambush overwhelms, cold water on the face resets the nervous system in seconds. Fudoshin. Observe. Don't identify. I notice my brain is craving. The moment you watch the urge, it loses its grip. Ikigai. Fill the void. Purpose-driven engagement replaces the emptiness that temptation was trying to fill. Zanshin. Map the ambush points. Preload defenses at your vulnerable hours. See it coming, and it can't surprise you. Shoshin. Zero guilt after failure. One sentence. One fix. Begin again immediately. The fall is data, not identity. The temptation is not a sign of weakness. It is a biological algorithm trying to hijack your potential. Willpower will fail you. Emotion will betray you. Only structure, endurance, and a lethal amount of self-awareness will keep you free. You are the architect of your mind. The fortress is yours to build. And every temptation you outlast, every craving you observe without obeying, every ambush you see coming before it strikes, each one adds another layer to a defense that eventually becomes unbreakable. Defend the fortress. No one else will. If this video changed how you deal with temptation, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. And tell me in the comments, what is your #1 temptation? The one that beats you most often? Name it publicly, because naming the enemy is the first act of building the Kekkai around it. The fortress begins tonight.